My name is Dr. Ryan Pride. I am the co-founder of the Moksha Group, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Soren Bjorn. Wow, what an amazing man. Soren is the CEO of Driscoll's Berry Company. Driscoll's is the largest berry company on the planet. And whoop, man, do they create some amazing fruit. And a big part of that is because they invest in the power of their people, and they aim to create delight in every consumer, that when you take a bite out of a Driscoll's berry, you are taken away to another place and experience a moment of bliss, even if it's just for a second. And what I love about this story that you're going to hear is that it's all about the power of resiliency. It's also the power in the CEO journey of what got you here won't get you there. Many of the skills that lead leaders to greatness and to become superstar individual contributors are not the same skills that make them great leaders. And Soren faced that head on. You're going to hear about how he was basically turned down for the CEO role and had to have that moment of really looking within and seeing if he still wanted to go for it. You're also going to hear about the power of a dream. When Soren started his life, he began his life in Denmark in a small little town. And from an early age, he always knew that he wanted to be a CEO. And he worked towards that dream with resiliency, with courage, with bravery, with tenacity. And wow, I'm so inspired by this man. And I'm so inspired by his leadership, understanding that relationships really matter, that culture is so important to create success in a business. Yeah, I hope you enjoy. There's a lot to learn here. And without further ado, let me introduce Soren Bjorn. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so happy to have you here. Obviously, we call this the Awakened Leader podcast, and I think you represent that more than most because of your leadership journey. I'm lucky enough to know a little bit about your journey. But the idea here is there's been a kind of an old model that we've had for a long time, that model of, hey, you're coming to work, leave all your personal stuff behind. My job as a leader is to really kick you in the ass. And of course, some of that I think is still around, but there's also a recognition that, man, times are moving, we're moving so fast and there's so much change. And that if you're not inspiring your people and aligning them, then you're probably going to get left behind by your competitors. And so a part of what we're doing is just showcasing leaders that get it and have really put in the work to do it right. And I judge you to be one of those leaders, and really happy to sit with you today.
Well, I appreciate that, Ryan, and I'm glad to be here. We have been on at least part of this journey together, okay? So, and you know my journey pretty well, so happy to share, what I've learned over the years. So
I actually want to start just from the beginning, because I know you grew up in a small town in Denmark, and I want to say that it's Skelkibor. Am I getting there?
close.
Say that for me.
I mean, Denmark we would say Silkeborg. I mean,
yes.
It actually means the Silk Castle after supposedly a bishop's hat that was put in the river, and where it hit the land is where they built a little castle. Okay, so yeah.
So from growing up in a small Denmark town of what 90,000 people or so, and then moving from that journey to CEO of the largest berry company in the world. What a journey. I would love to just start with what childhood was like for you in Denmark, and what you did and how you got here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a pretty sort of safe upbringing, probably like a lot of kids in Denmark. Okay, I would say we were sort of upper middle class. Okay, though early on in our family, so my early history, we had lots of ups and downs. We were in construction business, and during both the first and second oil crisis in the 1970s, that was not a good business to be in. So I do have sort of recollections of that as a kid. But I don't know what it was. I mean, fairly early on, I was just really interested in reading business books, especially autobiographies. including several by American business leaders. It's a lot of people. The story that, I think one of the books that sort of just grabbed my attention was Lee Iacocca, that was the quite famous CEO of Chrysler, who worked for both Ford and Chrysler. And that was probably one of the first business books I read. But I also read, there was a CEO of Scandinavian Airlines called Jan Carlson that wrote a book called Tear Down the Pyramids. And it was really about how do you get rid of bureaucracy and stuff like that. But I was just fascinated about what these people wrote, okay? And it wasn't like, I didn't even know what Chrysler was, okay? Growing up, there were no Chryslers in Denmark, okay? But the story of Lee Iacocca and how he became the CEO. And so I think fairly early on, I had this dream that one day, I would like to run a really famous American company. But, it's a long ways from having that dream, but it was always there in the background. And I can't say that I did anything in school or anything like that to necessarily, set myself on that path. It wasn't like sort of like a deliberate path that got me there, not until later on. But I happened to be, I was a pretty decent golfer growing up, was on the junior national team, ended up on the national team. And 1 week got paired up with this kid that was from America. And I got to meet his parents. And eventually his parents got me a golf scholarship at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And in 1989, I walked in and told my parents that I'm packing my bags in 5 weeks and I'm going to Texas. And I had never been to the Americas, much less Waco, Texas. So by then I was at university already in Denmark, in Aarhus, the second biggest city in Denmark. Mm-hmm. And I basically went from there and, went out and quit school in Denmark and took off to Waco, Texas. And
wow. What did you first think of America when you came?
I was so amazed. Okay, I have these initial impressions. Okay, two of them are just kind of funny. I remember there was a really, really long flight to get from Denmark. We had to make all these stops. Okay, and so I remember the last leg of the flight was from Minneapolis down to Dallas, and it was on August 5th. And so we landed late in the evening, and I remember grabbing all my bags, and I had a couple of friends that were going to other schools, so we all kind of traveled together. I remember walking out the door at the airport and having this thought in my mind. It's like, wow, that is so strange that they're blowing this hot air in the door in the middle of summer. And then I realized they were not blowing hot air. It was the outside temperature, and it was, as it was often in Dallas, windy. And I just couldn't fathom that it could be that hot at 10:30 at night.
Right.
And so I was like, uh-oh. And and then, of course, when I woke up the next morning and we had to go out and play golf somewhere, it was so hot. Okay. And I had just never been a place like that. I'd never been in a really, really hot place.
Yeah. You probably grew up ice skating on the lakes, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, a nice warm day in Denmark is, 72 degrees. Okay. So, and then I did, my second impression was, I remember, so when I was a teenager, the show Dallas was on Danish television.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of American television. And so I remember what that was all like, okay, like on the pictures. And the next day we had to drive from one of the suburbs in Dallas over to Fort Worth. And we were just out in these wide open spaces. And then all of a sudden you could see the skyscrapers. And I'd never seen a skyscraper. Okay. And so you see this city that sort of just comes out of nothing. And that's when I realized that this is just completely different, right? But I adapted pretty quick. I felt like, some of the other kids I went with, I mean, there was really far away from home. We couldn't go home very often. And, I was a couple of years older. I was already 21 or 22 when I came. So I probably had a little bit more maturity and could sort of handle the adversity. And, I never really got sort of homesick or anything like that. And so I was fascinated by the whole thing. I also graduated sort of fairly quickly in 3.5 years. And I didn't really want to go back, and at that time, there probably weren't as many opportunities for young people in Denmark, quite different today from what it was back then. So I really wanted to stay. And so after I got my degree at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, I got a job up in Dallas, and that's how I ended up in the food business.
Wow. And it makes you pretty unique that you were, I can imagine a 16-year-old Soren in his room reading, Lee Iacocca. I imagine that was not the norm, to have someone that you just always were fascinated with leadership, and that you actually achieved your dream and your vision. And I'm really curious about that arc, because reading about leadership and then being in leadership are two very different things. And I'd love to know just about that journey and what you've learned along the way.
Yeah. I think there's things you can copy, right? There are certain traits that a lot of leaders have in common. I think particular things around discipline and stuff like that. And one of the first books I read was an autobiography by Mark McCormack. Mark McCormack was the founder of International Management Group, IMG. And he was sort of very famous for like how disciplined he was with his calendar. So I actually went out and got the exact same kind of calendar that he had when I was 14 years old, not 16, 18. And I would have a calendar like that. And I think people that know me today know it's like I'm a big stickler about being on time. Like if you are literally right on time, like in my language, you are already late. And people that show up late for my meetings or meetings we're in together, probably feel the cold air in the room. So, but there's certain disciplines I think you can sort of pick up, right? But then there's a lot of who are you as a person, right? And that also very much depends then on the circumstances you get put into and the kind of company you work for, right? So I think different personalities for different organizations is definitely, very, very important, because you got all sorts of cultures, right? And so you talked a bit about, like in your opening, about, we're leaders, we got pound on people, but maybe that works in certain organizations. And I've been part of organizations where that was the leadership style. I never particularly liked it, but I, probably did get influenced by it to some extent. I've been at Driscoll's now almost 19 years, and I got hired here originally with the idea of being the successor to our longtime chairman and CEO, Miles Ryder, who has worked in the company now for 50 some years, straight out of school, and most of it as chairman and a lot of it as CEO as well. And so I was officially his successor for a long time. And one day, I remember it was right before Christmas, and we had just had twins, and I had just had my appendix removed. It all happened within 3 weeks. And Miles said, "Hey, I need to see you." And so he sat me down and he told me, he said, "I'm taking you off my successor list." And I had all this stuff going on in my own life, at the same time. And I was just like, I just can't believe that I also have this. And but he's very good, and he still is. He was very clear about why.
What did he tell
you? He felt like I wasn't very good at listening. I made up my mind too fast. I didn't bring people along. Well enough. And I mean, basically said, "Hey, you're really smart. You understand the business. You get the business." And I can kind of tell he was disappointed, and I was also disappointed. And it was probably good it was the holidays, because it really, what I had to do over the next couple of weeks, I had to decide whether coming to Driscoll's to ultimately being the CEO, if that was never going to happen, did I want to stay? I mean, I think it was very obvious. I felt like at that point in my career, I could do lots of other things. And it probably was that, I would have been in my, sort of mid to late 40s at the time, mid 40s, a pretty easy time to leave and go and do something else. I had plenty of career ahead of me. And I decided that I was going to prove him wrong, that he made a mistake. It became my number one goal to figure out, and not in a sort of out of spite, but really it's like, now I got this in me. He just doesn't see it. And that's kind of where our journey, shortly after started together, right? And I worked with both you and your wife. And I had to find something in me that had to come out, and but I knew it was there, and so I was glad I did that. Okay, I tell other leaders, I tell my kids, is that it's in those very moments, I think you really find out who you are, and I have a younger brother who's a very accomplished professional golfer, and he's had these similar points in his career where he was just like at this amazing low. But he's always had this innate ability after some time and frustration and stuff like that to say, no, this is not the end of it. Okay, I'm going to come back and I'm going to show them. That is I think a very, very powerful trait, because if you actually can do it, the confidence then people have in you, because you've shown that you can overcome adversity. The sort of most, severe adversity that you can have in terms of like your professional career, right? There are other things obviously in life that may be more important. And anybody who's responsible for a leader, okay, and so in my case, our chairman, our board, they love to see that, right? Because of course we in a business will have lots of adversity along the way. It is how we deal with that. And so,
wow, that had to be hard though. I mean, Miles Ryder, I know obviously about his history and what a legendary figure he is, and what an incredible leader he is. And to have, that mentor of yours say, hey, Soren, you're the smartest guy in the room, but you're missing these relational skills that we really need here. And so there's not only that information that you're getting, but there's also like, how do I change this perception? Even if I do the work, will he even see it? And man, that's an uphill battle. And not an easy
it definitely
one.
is. I mean, I think once you develop a reputation, it's difficult to overcome it. That can both be a positive part of your reputation and obviously a negative part. And the negative is more, as you know, it tends to stick with you more, right? But if you have the positive reputation, you can also get away with stuff, right? That seems like, well, he's such a good guy, and it'll all be fine. Okay, it's like, oh, this is a mess. Okay, but so it does go both ways. But I think this willingness to dig deeper, to overcome the adversity, probably has now turned out to be a trait that is definitely associated with with some of my personal brand.
100%. And I mean, I've witnessed firsthand just the amount of resiliency that you've had in our little journey together, and you can share of that what you want, but I can tell you that it is a real testament to who you are. And I also I applaud this. I think when you get in probably your 40s, mid 40s ish, that's when you've really dealt with the consequences of being yourself, right? It's like, in your 20s, you're going to conquer the world, and your 30s, maybe things didn't quite work out the way you wanted. And it's easy to blame situations or other people. But by the time you get in your 40s, you can't blame anything anymore except yourself. And you have to, it's kind of life comes full circle. And it's like, okay, this is who I am. Is this who I want to be? And then what's kind of now probably the hardest work in the world to go about changing certain patterns, which may have not led to the outcomes that you may have wanted. And it's not an easy thing to do. I'd love to know, like, how did you start that process? So because obviously it worked, like whatever you did worked. How did you make that happen?
I think you got to be willing to get help.
Yeah.
Because I think if you don't do that, the risk is it becomes a very, very lonely journey. Okay, I'm not saying you can't overcome it, but it becomes a very lonely journey. Your experience, my experience, there's nothing unique about that. Okay, my personal character is, I am one out of a billion. Okay, but there are a lot of characters that are similar to mine. Okay, and how do they get away in a culture like ours? Okay, but I get it. I think getting help. And you got to get help from somebody you really trust, right? So it can be somebody close in, okay, for sure. But it can also be somebody who's really professional that does this for a living, right? I mean, I think in some ways I felt like that was more helpful. And so it wasn't like January, I just came back, 3 weeks later after you told me this, okay, and I'm saying, okay, I'm turning this around tomorrow, okay. I mean, I didn't have a plan, okay. I just had a motivation. And And then when I got introduced to you guys, okay, and then you guys sort of started poking at me, okay, it's like, hey, where is this, right? It took a little while before we got it out, but I was motivated, right, to
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm willing to be a little vulnerable here and go to some spaces that I hadn't been before, and then sort of work on it, right? And that can be I mean, this is completely different for every person, and I think
Yeah.
that in particular when you get up to in the more senior roles, hey, you have these pieces that are really missing, right?
Mhm.
And can we agree that these are the missing pieces, right? I mean, first is it's like so many other things. Again, first you gotta like be willing to recognize it, right? And that took me, I mean, it only took me a few weeks because it wasn't like I wasn't like completely unaware. And then you have to start come up with a bit of a plan, right?
Yep.
And it can take a while until you find somebody or several people that you are comfortable with, whether it's
Sure.
executive coach or whatever it is, right?
And there's a big
And
stigma around that, isn't there? Like, I mean, it seems like we have such, especially in the West, such a stigma around getting help or asking for help. It makes us look weak. And yet, I think if you look any professional athlete, they wouldn't blink, right? They get a coach. It's
yeah,
just part of it. They understand they
yeah,
need it.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that is maybe it's a little bit how we have been brought up, okay, and there's somewhere it is that's healthy to go and deal with somewhere yourself, okay, but that's not difficult for a Nordic person, right? We like our alone time, okay, so there was plenty of that as well, okay, and
Yeah.
so
That's
but
important
I
too,
did,
right? That's important.
yeah,
I mean, you have to
yeah,
kind of, I think part of like the hardest things about adulthood is, facing your own silence. It's like we have these voices in our head and we don't often like those voices. And so rather than just be with it, we distract ourselves in 1,000 other ways, right? We watch TV or numb out, in this way or that way. And so getting to know yourself and what your honest truth is does require a certain amount of silence and alone time. I totally agree with you.
yeah, that's not difficult for me to find that alone time, okay, so
Mhm.
I'm pretty good at that. So I think that's, you find the right people you can partner with, whether it's inside your organization, outside your organization. I mean, in our case, we went outside, right? And then eventually I brought you into the whole team, right? So it wasn't just me, right? So it became part of the whole team, right? So the team I was leading at the time, the Americas team, and got them to partner up, right, with me on the stuff that I need to be held accountable for, right? And created this safe space for all of them to give me the feedback. And I think one of the things I've become much better at over the years, and when I started transitioning into the CEO role 15, 16 months ago, one of the first things I realized is, okay, I should really have a partner in this, okay? Somebody that's worked with CEOs before, knows all the traps that you fall into, the things that you're so busy all of a sudden, again, that's all you wanted to go and change the whole world overnight, and can very quickly become ineffective doing so, right? Because you can't solve it all at once, okay? And so
Yeah.
and very importantly, you need to, as a leader, the big decisions, you got to make sure they can stick, right? And not like it's easy to shout out from the ivory tower and make the decisions from the big office, okay? But how do you make it stick in the organization?
Yeah,
And that
100%.
takes
I mean,
work.
it totally takes work. And I think that it's something that people don't often think about, which is that at this point, because things are moving so fast and everything is decentralized for the most part, right? You've got people moving all over the world trying to make your mission happen. It really does require every team to be on a mission, and it better be aligned, right? Or you've got people rowing in different directions. And that's not an easy thing for CEOs to do. It's something I think that Driscoll's has done incredibly well because you are mission focused. Everyone in the company understands the mission at hand. You are a value based organization. You can talk to anybody in the organization and they know Driscoll's values, and that I think is a testimony to leadership and really what you and Miles have done. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really remarkable about you, Soren, is that you seem fearless, that you move forward and you mentioned Sheila and I and the work that we helped you do culturally and with the team. But honestly, like as much as we came in and tried to do our little magic, it was really you. You said, "Hey, I want everybody's feedback. I want to get in front of them, and I want them to see me receive that feedback. And I don't want to in any way run away from it. That I want to face it head first, and I want to learn and grow from it. And there's just not many leaders that are willing to show up because of ego, looking bad in front of their direct reports. And I just think that was just one of the most amazing things about you, is that probably a testimony to the value of humility at Driscoll's. But that you did that, and it did it so bravely, and I think it made a big difference in how your team saw you.
I definitely had the good fortune of already having a culture that was highly collaborative and very open. We share a lot. Okay. And we've had the benefit. We're a private company. We don't have to we just share all the financials with our employees, right? We just say, this is how we're doing, right?
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly. Okay. And I'm very comfortable in front of the audience, and I like to engage with them. And so, my town halls was, fairly frequent. Okay. Even though it's all over the world. And so when we do them, I have to do 2 of them to get everybody in all the time zones. But I really want the engagement. I don't want to stand up there for an hour and a half and just preach to them. Okay. I want to talk for a little bit. Okay. And then really and that's been an interesting experience, because some cultures, it's been very difficult to get the questions out, right? So we sort of had to really work with certain parts of the world and say, hey, no, he really does want the questions. Okay. So I had to go to some of these places in person and sit down with them as a group, so it was much more comfortable. And now when I do the, virtual town halls kind of like this, we get lots of questions, right? And it goes all sorts of places, right? And I mean, these days, there are obvious questions that come in, but I try to take them head on the way I see it. When we don't have answers, and there's a lot of things these days we don't have answers to in business, okay? And I'm not pretending that we do, right? And I think that the organization feels really comfortable with that, and that's the feedback we get. They're totally fine with it that we don't know. When we don't know, as opposed to try to spin it. And so I never really try to do that. That's just not my thing.
I love that. I think it's a great sign of confidence when someone says, actually, I don't know the answer to that. Way better than trying to puff up and say something that they don't quite know.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I have been fortunate, okay, to have the kind of organization we have here. And we communicate a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, and we try to do, it's impossible to do it all in person because we are all over the world now. But we are very committed to, one mission, one vision, and 3 core values of passion, humility, and trustworthiness. And, where it has to get translated into, Spanish or Chinese or whatever language, okay, it has to represent what it was intended to do. And so we do really good at explaining how we got to these values, what's behind them, what does it look like in action, and that you can relate to that in pretty much any culture.
Yeah, and I want to just celebrate Driscoll's for a minute, because I am continually wowed by this company, right? It started from a small, mom and pop shop, in the early 1900s, I think 1904. Maybe I'm getting the date wrong, and thinking about where it came from and to what it is today, now all over the world. And I think the remarkable achievement of berry tasting the same, in Florida as it does in California, as it does in Mexico, as it does in Spain, that is a phenomenal achievement. I know that you have a world-class breeding program. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of the PhDs over there that are just, their science is outstanding. And I know that you dedicate a huge amount of resources to just ensuring that you have the best breeding program on the planet. But I think also the supply chain, wow, that you've got to pick a fruit and make sure that you get it in someone's mouth and it still tastes good, and that you can do that in all 4 seasons, right? That I can go right now to my local grocery store and get a strawberry that is ripe and fresh and still delivers delight. And it was probably grown, I guess, in Mexico or Spain? Where are you?
Yeah,
I'm sure
well,
you,
you're in St. Louis, okay, so maybe Florida, okay, I mean, Florida, probably more like the Florida this time of year, okay,
uh,
but
but
yeah,
that's
I mean,
phenomenal, Soren. You've got all of these different grower partners that are all doing it in a consistent way. I mean, you're like the Amazon of the berry business, right? You've really dialed in how to do supply chain and logistics and to deliver this amazing experience when you bite into a berry. I think it really is a phenomenal achievement. And I'd love to know, like, when you think about the company and you think about your journey, you're the CEO of this company, you're leading it. Where are you at now in your journey? And where do you see Driscoll's going next?
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's made Driscoll's incredibly successful, and as I mean, by any measure, really, is we've done a really good job staying focused. So, from the outside, it just looks like four berries, right? Raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, and blueberries. And how difficult can it be? And then you get on the inside, okay? And I mean, we will have some of the smartest people in the world come and visit us, and then we will tour them around and show them as much as we can in a day or half. And they're just like, we had no idea, okay, that is
Hmm.
that complicated.
Hmm.
So I think we did a really good job of not getting too distracted, right? We are much more global. We're actually in 28 countries now. We sell in 70 or
28.
so
Yeah.
countries, well, and so we're basically in the whole world. We have grown a lot, so we continue to grow double digits. We've been growing double digits annually since the 1990. Okay, it's a long time to grow at a double digit rate. And so the company has completely changed, right? It's more than 10 times bigger than when I joined. Okay. And but it's the focus on those four things, right? So, and because it's so hard, right? I mean, it is just so difficult what we do. So our whole supply chain is built not for fresh produce, it's built for fresh berries, right? Everything we think about, everything from planning and forecasting and how we sell and how we engage with our customers is berry specific, right? It's not like general produce or the broader part of what's in the store. Now, we have also been fortunate that we are right in this core where consumers want to go. We're fresh, we're convenient, it's indulgent and healthy at the same time. This is a rare combination, right? So not typically one or the other. Okay, we have the fortune being it's a beautiful product, right? So you have all these vibrant colors. Strawberries in particular has a lot of romanticism around the berry, right? So
Sure.
we did this exercise 10, 12 years ago where we interviewed consumers all over the world about berries. But the way we did it was we had to write that they had to write an essay about berries. And then if we took all the essays back and reshuffled them and didn't tell people that then had to read the essays where the essay was written, they could not identify the country or the part of the world where the essay was written.
Wow.
So a story written about strawberries in Shanghai looked just like a story about strawberries in St. Louis, okay,
Isn't
or in
that
Amsterdam,
interesting?
right? And so you just couldn't tell, right? And so that's also great. There's something there to tap into that the marketing people love to tap into. That sort of goes, much more deeper. And then we've been very committed to our brand. There's not a lot of brand in fresh produce, right? There's a few, but not very many. And in big parts of the world, particularly Europe and Australia, is pretty much all private label. And I have been personally part of flying to see a customer in Europe, very, very good customer, one of the highest paying customers we had in all of Europe, and say, we're sorry, but we can no longer supply your private label or your own label or even a co-branded product. We will only supply you if it's in our brand. And then they fired us right there. We walked away from, it was us at that time, our second biggest customer in all of Europe. And they were the highest paying customer we had. And we walked away because we were committed to the thing that we are committed to all the things we are committed to. And I think that commitment, right? Also, like, there wasn't anybody in our European organization that thought we were going to do this. Even the general manager I was on the plane with, going to see the customer, he's like, they got a cave. By the time we get into the meeting and the customer says no, they got a cave. We walked up and said, no, hopefully one day they come back around and want to work with us again. And in most instances, they have, right?
Wow.
So I think also
What?
that commitment, right, to
Yeah.
doing this. And so there's a lot of runway in fresh berries. I mean, we've done a really good job of making them, sort of more available and therefore more affordable, right? There used to be times a year, like right now, where they were really not that available and they're very, very expensive, but it's,
Yep.
a lot more available today. And that means that more and more consumers are coming into the category.
Yep.
And, you have it for breakfast. Okay, I just had blueberries right here for my breakfast. Okay. And you can have it as a snack. You can have it on a salad. You can have it, before you go to bed at night and
Yeah,
not
and
feel guilty about it.
the consistency that Driscoll's is able to maintain throughout the season, that my blueberries taste the same now as they will in the summer. I have no idea how you guys spin that magic, but it for me is very much like I'm a consciousness researcher. It's for me, it's a Zen experience. I literally close my eyes and go to a different world when I bite into one of your strawberries, and I think that that's just something that no other brand has ever been able to produce in me. And so I think it's really a testimony to the delight that you're trying to create, because it really is an experience. I want to actually come back to this thing that you said about laser focus and commitment, because one of the things that I see in my work, right, more than anything else, is executive teams want to go off and they want to do a strategic plan. It's like, we're going to spend the day together and we're going to put this thing down on paper and, oh, okay, we got it done. Maybe we'll wordsmith it a bit, put a thesaurus on it, and, try to make it sexy. But it's an exercise. And what I try to preach, and it is very much a preaching, is that your mission has to be felt in the hearts of every single person showing up to work every day. And so there needs to be a lot of time actually spent on this idea of vision, mission, and probably even values as well. It can't be just an exercise, because what it ultimately leads to is exactly what you talked about. It's the type of trade-off decisions you're going to have to make. They're not easy. In a complicated world, you've got to make these hard decisions, and knowing which one to choose often is going to be aligned with your vision and mission, especially if you've done that work the right way. And it seems like that's been a huge part of why you've got a 100-year legacy and still are growing.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's the easiest part for me to take over as CEO, because I don't have to change it, right? I have to keep building upon it. And I think one of the mistakes that the particular CEOs make is that they come in and they want to make this mark, right? And so they change the mission, they change the vision, they change the values, because nobody believes in it. Only the CEO believes in it. They change the design of the brand because it's outdated, whatever. And of course, sometimes it is outdated, and sometimes it doesn't. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen with the CEO change. And so I made it really clear: I'm not touching those things. Okay, I'm just not touching it. Okay, I want to build upon it. I want to make it stronger. I want to make it more come alive. Okay, where I see opportunities to do that. But I think that's mission, vision, values really, really hard, because putting them up in the wall is almost the wrong place to start. Okay, and so it's got to be really ingrained. And I remember when I joined here, it's like there wasn't really you didn't really see it very many places in the office. I see a lot more now. Okay, we have a lot more branding, in our design today. But I will say, I actually don't have it here on my wall, on any of the walls in my office. You got to make it so that the whole employees base believes, in particular people at the top, that they live it, right? And so we survey our employees every year. We do a massive survey of all our employees every 2 years. And one of the most critical questions is, does the executive team live our mission, vision, and values, right? And we have in the past drifted a little bit on some of this.
Sure.
We just got it back, like a month and a half ago, and this was like the first question I went to look to. I said, well, this is my first year. I hope I didn't drop down on this one, right? And which luckily I didn't, so that was good. So it just starts there, right? And then you have to bring it into everything, and then you have to explain to people, right? And then you bring all the new people on. And for us, the hardest part has been is we went so international in a pretty short order, right? So
yeah,
we took over all these companies that we'd sort of been involved with in Europe. We had these partnerships and joint ventures and stuff like that. And a lot of them didn't even have our name on the door, right? So when I joined, and everything outside North America was my responsibility. So I had Europe, South America, and Australia, and most of that didn't have the Driscoll's name on the door. And I was like, this company has such a strong culture. You have this incredible commitment to what you're doing, and you have these businesses that you invested in, and you're not even willing to put your own name on it. And it was quite a fight, okay, actually with our board and stuff like that. I said, I can't do this job. If we are not willing to put our own name on the door, we will never get these people that work for us in these places around the world to be part of our culture, okay? And so eventually came around, and we got rid of all the joint ventures. We made them, our own companies. We saw, that became my job of buying back all these companies and put our name on the door and get everybody sort of like indoctrinated in the way that Driscoll's likes to do things. And that takes a long time, right? And you can't just use the words, because those words are easily, we have had such a difficult time with both the humility and trustworthiness. And trustworthiness, a lot of people just want to turn it into trust, which is like, that's a part of trustworthiness, but it is not what trustworthiness means.
That's right.
And so it becomes a shortcut, right, that people that will take, right, in certain parts of the world. And so we've had gotten explain and put in all our training materials and have executives show up and say, okay, this is what it looks like in action, right? It's very deliberate. And so, Miles, he would never start a meeting that he was leading without starting with the mission of the company.
Interesting.
And so he's probably set that mission 30,000 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And, if you're in most of the meetings, you go like, here we go again, right. But you make absolutely sure that there's not a new employee that somehow is in the meeting go like, oh, well, they don't even start with a mission, right? No, we start with it.
Yeah.
And so the repetitiveness of it, and that's the problem when you change too often, is you can't repeat enough.
Right.
You just didn't have enough repetition. And so it doesn't stick, and that's wherefore in a lot of companies it is just words on the wall. That's all it is. Okay.
Yep.
And you dig down and start asking the employees about the words on the wall, and they go like, those are nice. Okay. But we don't really do that here.
I think Larry Sinn was brilliant when he said culture is a shadow of leadership. That slogan has stuck for good reasons, because we do model our leaders. And that's why that question that you talked about on the survey, do our leaders actually live the values, is so important. And and you do, Soren. You're one of those rare leaders that it really shows up for them. You are so humble. You absolutely have so much passion for this company. And of course you operate with trustworthiness, and I see that. I'd love to know what's next for you.
Yeah. I'm actually writing my 2024 reflections. So I've asked my whole executive team to write. We're each going to write a letter to our board. For each of us is our reflections on 2024.
Interesting.
And so what did we learn, right? So instead of just writing another memo about all the results and stuff like that every board member can read.
Yeah.
It's really writing a sort of a reflection back. And so for me, of course, this was a big year, right? This is my first year as CEO, and what are all the things that I learned, both about myself and about the business. And there was definitely some things. There are also opportunities that opens up. Like, you get to put that title right next to your name, and all of a sudden there are a whole bunch of people that want to talk to you, okay, that never want to talk to me before.
It's true.
So that's good, okay, but then also you got to be super selective, right? So sort of like, I was sort of my way into the year, I go like, I'm in the wrong place, okay? Like, I'm here talking to this group of whoever, okay? I like it, okay, but this is not where I should be. I should have somebody on my team do this, right? So having to reprioritize what's most important, and what do you just need to have other people do.
Yes.
And I'm good at delegating now. I'm not a micromanager, okay? But I just sort of found that it was a pretty big reshuffle of my time. I spent a lot more time on people issues, okay, whether it's the organization as a whole or individuals, right? Because it's super important. Because now everybody is an extension of me, okay?
Yeah.
Before it was just a subset of everybody.
That's right.
And so that becomes even more important. And you start seeing things and go like that. Maybe before you're like, yeah, okay, well, somebody will figure that out. Okay, it was like, no, nobody's going to figure it out. I have to have somebody go and figure it out for me, or I have to go and figure it out. Agriculture is just completely out of your control. Right? It's just like Mother Nature, and
I cannot
and
even
Mother Nature
imagine.
plays a big role in our
Right.
world. Okay, and that won't
Especially,
change.
yeah, California. I mean, I think about not only the water crisis and being in agriculture, but also now the fires. And yeah, my heart goes out to anyone in the company that's been impacted. I'm sure that has not been easy because I know that you operations in Oxnard, which are fairly close to LA, and I imagine that just all the wildfires that you've had to deal with have probably been a real threat to the business, and also water issues, and that's not just California, but that's all over the world. There's these things happening, and I can't imagine the amount of agility that's required just to run your operations.
A business like ours is definitely impacted by how the climate has changed over time, and it doesn't matter the reason for why it's changed. That does not matter. Okay, and that really is irrelevant to what we're trying to deal with, and so we're kind of like the fine wine grapes. Okay, we're not as exposed as they are, but we are right next to them. Okay, and
Right.
we
Sure.
need these microclimates to produce really high quality berries, right? So this is why we are right here on the coast of California. We're on the coast of Portugal. We are up in high elevation mountains in central Mexico, or in Yunnan province in China, or up the coast of Australia and places like that. Okay, so we have to go and find these microclimates around the world where you can have cool nights, not too cold, it can't freeze, and then ideally long periods of sunny and warm but not hot days, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, basically, the berries want to live like in Orange County by the coast, so like Laguna Beach every day, except there's no farmland left in Laguna Beach, right?
Right.
So we have to go and find that all over the world, right? And the time of year to put it all together. And those microclimates are getting squeezed and pushed around, right? Because of the changes in water temperatures and things like that. And another thing is just the increased volatility of it, right? That we have more natural disasters. Now, part of that for us is just because we are in so many more places, so that it probably for us feels like worse than it even is, because we've just increased the odds, right? And so we have dealt with floods and wildfires, back-to-back years in Australia, right? Obviously, wildfires in California. We've had these sort of on and off. I myself got evacuated 1 year. Luckily, everything was fine. We have to protect all the workers, right? So we can't be out there working and harvesting berries, okay? And so we luckily don't have anybody that's displaced. Winds are close network from the big fires. But it is a new reality, so we need to figure out how to come up with new ways of thinking, right? And so I think this is also where I think leadership today, if you're in the CEO chair for a lot of companies, I think it is a much more complex world going forward, right? That, whether it's the politics of the world, I wrote in my reflections is, my whole career, my whole professional career, I've only ever known a world that's more and more open to trade, right? As an example, that's the whole world. That's my whole professional career. My first job, I was asked to go down to Mexico, and it was while the original North American Free Trade Agreement hadn't been signed yet, but everybody was talking about it. They were like putting final touches on it, and then it happened very shortly thereafter. So that's when I started my career, right before the first North American Free Trade Agreement, and after that it was just one after another, right? And so all the countries we deal with in the Americas, Peru, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Canada, of course, the United States, we all have free trade agreements with one another. And that world is very, very, very likely to change. Okay. And that is not just Donald Trump. Okay.
Right.
That is the sentiment all over the world. Okay. And so the world is changing, right? And then we are here in America, and we may sort of associate it with our president. Okay,
Right.
but I mean, he's part of this, right? Of course. Okay, and
Of
he's
course.
maybe accelerating some things, but this is a much greater sentiment that exists in the world, where a lot more parts of the world are anti-immigrant as opposed to open, right?
Yeah.
And I come from a country, where when I grew up, this was sort of part of the national pride was that we had always been an open country, right? We saved as a country, we saved the highest percentage of Jews that were in our country of any country in Europe, and so there was a sense of national pride about that. My parents grew up with that, and that's completely changed. Okay, and
Right.
I have a difficult time rationalizing my own head because I don't want to associate my home country where I grew up. Okay, I mean I'm now a dual citizen, both American and Danish, and in many ways a lot more American. But I'm having such a difficult time in my head that this is how the country has changed. Okay, and my very closest friends, my three dearest friends, are from Denmark, living in the hometown I grew up in, and their sentiment is like completely different than the way I would have thought it would be. But that's a new reality that business leaders are living in, and you can't fight it because you can't fight the sentiment of the people, right?
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to work with it, right? And still have your own belief. And yeah. I mean, and obviously as leaders, we I mean, big companies, we have a voice, okay, and hopefully we get to sit at the table from time to time and at least express what we hope to see, right? But we're not the elected officials, we're not in charge, right?
It
And
is
so
tough. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
because that it's really interesting because I'm a student of history, and if you look at our broad history, wide net, wide aperture, right, not narrow, you can see this constant movement, right, from one pole to the other. That we go centralized, and then for a long time, and then we move to a decentralized world, and then we're tired of decentralization and we move back to centralization. And you can see how we are now sort of ripe for this movement back to an insular world, right? We've been connected and global, and now you can feel the restriction happening. I think Donald Trump does obviously get blamed for a lot of this, but I think that your point remains. This is not a Donald Trump thing. We're seeing this all over the world, with many leaders, starting to do this protection thing. And it will be interesting to see what happens to business and global trade.
yeah, I mean, you should always remember that. I mean, so in all the democracies, it's the people that put them in charge, right? So this is not, I mean, Donald Trump didn't anoint himself, right? Whoever, right, and is in charge, and right, and you see people that have been trying to fight it in all sorts of democracies, and they just get voted out of power, right? We like to see that in Canada, for example, right? Very likely to see that, and so it is but that's the voice of the people, right? So we should all recognize that. Okay, and certainly if you're running a business, even if you disagree with the direction you're going, I mean, then you're going against, in all likelihood, the sentiment of your consumer. Okay, and we will never do that as a brand. We're not going to go against the sentiment of our consumers, right? So that's what we're here to serve. Okay, so
And it's really interesting to me that we have this consciousness that's with us all the time. So should we look in the mirror and we feel like the same person as the person looking in the mirror when we were 12 or 13 years old, but we're really different. And I listen to myself on recordings from 5 years ago, and sometimes I'm like, who was that idiot? And I realize how much I've changed and evolved in that short period of time, such that I don't even like the things I was saying just a short 5 years ago. But yet I feel very much the same person. When I was 5 years ago, when I was talking, I felt like me. But now from this vantage point, I look backwards. Who is that guy? And I think, one of the things I'd love to explore with you in closing is just if you reflected on the many parts of you that you've been throughout your career and kind of who you are now and how that's different from you or just a short time ago, like where are you at today? And what, when I imagine that now I'm projecting here, but I'm imagining, you've made it to this position and now you're probably thinking about your legacy and, the company that you want to leave behind. And so I'd love to explore that with you and just where you're at now and what you've learned as a result of these last 5 years.
I feel very strongly that my greatest legacy at Driscoll is that the day I'm no longer here, okay, is that they don't really miss me, okay, the next day, okay. I mean, hopefully they miss me as a human being, but they
Of
don't miss
course.
me in the for the purpose of what happens to the business the next day. And I think that's one of the hard parts of being the person that steps in behind like a real legacy leader like Miles, right?
Sure.
So I mean, I think of Miles as like the Steve Jobs of the produce business, right? Really. I mean, I really do. Okay, that's the way he thinks. Okay, and it's just like this is very hard to imagine somebody's mind focused on berries thinks like the way like Steve Jobs would think. But I'm not that kind of leader. That is not. I'm not. That is not me. I think I'm really good at strategy and looking around the corner and sort of anticipating a little bit what's coming, right? And then just like, okay, well, how do we then get ourselves prepared for that, or take advantage of the opportunities about to rise, or protect ourselves against the threat that are about to happen to us. So that I think is my legacy. But that really just means that what I'm done here is that I've set the company up for those new opportunities. Okay, and but it's not like it has my name on it. Okay,
Yeah.
and I don't really care about that. Okay, I think it is not true that it's over. I used to tell people that I felt like the day of the hero CEO and stuff like that was over. That I think Elon Musk has changed that. Okay, there are still some CEOs, okay, that are like that. Jamie Dimon, said Elon Musk, okay, Jeff Bezos, okay, and I mean, and some of them are the founders, okay, and I think the founders are different, right? But I mean, Jamie Dimon probably a little bit more, okay, is this sort of greater than life persona, okay. But I don't think most companies are like that anymore, right? I think the days of Jack Welch and stuff like that, I think those days are over.
Yeah.
Okay, where the persona just sort of takes over the whole company. That is really a thing of the past. Okay, and I think it's because the world is too complex today. Okay, and that's like something I reflect a lot on here at Driscoll. Is I think as well as the company has done, is the opportunities were a little bit more obvious. Okay, I don't think anybody inside the company thought that the company was ever going to be as big or successful as it's become. But the opportunities were a little bit more obvious, right? That if you could have really good tasting berries year round, people probably would eat them year round, okay, and not just in the summertime. And if you could figure that out, it's as hard, but not hard like going to Mars hard, okay?
Right.
But that's not the way it is going forward, right? It's like, how are we going to navigate this world, right? Yes, we can call it isolationism or whatever we want to call it, okay, but it's not isolationism like the 1920s and 30s,
right?
Okay, it's going to have a very different flavor this time around. But what does it look like? Okay, and I think we have an idea about what. I mean, we certainly have a theory about what the direction is heading, and how do we best position our business to be really successful in that environment.
It's nice to be in a product business. I'll tell you right now, if you're in a knowledge business, I think about, just the impact that AI is bringing into the table and what that's going to be like. It won't be long before, if you're closing the books, you tell the AI agent to, run the numbers and crunch the decks, and it's done in a day. And, architects who can have drafts put together for them. There's now an AI agent that will read radiology images better than any radiologist in the country. And I think about, wow, the amount of change that we've seen in just 8 months, and what that will be like in the future. And I
think that's one of the big opportunities for us. Okay, and I can tell you the three big things that are sort of the pillars that I'm really working on and have worked on in the start of from the first day I took over is what is going to be the role of technology in our business. So we are investing tremendously to lay the technology foundation, both in R&D and information technology, because we ultimately see these things, they already started to merge. Okay, like the overlap between information technology and R&D, partly because of the computing power that allows us to better understand and see inside your genetics, okay, really how things work. These things become very important. We are the poster child for AI, okay, as a company.
Interesting.
How you would use it in the future, not how you would use it today, how you use it in the future. Because if you listen to, for example, Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, he will talk about the real power for this is not to do the things that you just said. Close the books, read the, MRI scan or whatever. Yeah. Those are largely repetitive tasks, okay? They have some variability in them, but they're largely repetitive. And the variability has these mostly known patterns. But we're inside the berry business. We have this incredible knowledge about berries, but it's only Driscoll's berries. It's not everybody else's berries, right? Because our varieties are all different from everybody else's.
That's right.
So, but there's a tremendous amount of know-how, okay? And we got to get it to every farmer in every corner of the world, right? So what do we do today? Well, we either take a phone call or video call, or we send an agronomist or a pathologist or entomologist, all over the world to go and look at these things. And this is where AI really comes in, right? Because those are also repetitive patterns that are showing up, but they're unique to Driscoll's. They're Driscoll's repetitive patterns. And so for things like, forecasting how many berries we're going to have next week and stuff like that, we're already using AI, okay? What's the price going to be next week, 3 weeks from now, 13 weeks from now? We're going to start using AI for that. But the berry agronomist, who we could not possibly hire enough of, is now going to be in the hands of every farmer, and you're going to have unbelievable knowledge about, right, at the front line of where you're making a spray decision and an irrigation decision, a harvest decision, right, as to what should happen. And so,
that's amazing.
All of this stuff is powered by, enabled by technology, not powered by, but is enabled by data that is plentiful and clean, right? And so that's the investment we're making today is let's get this data really, really well organized, okay? And as these AI engines get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then apparently got a lot cheaper yesterday.
Yeah, my gosh. Oh, I saw it's a DeepSeek is just like we're doing it for 1/10 of the cost.
And
allegedly.
Yeah, that may democratize the whole thing. So that's a good thing.
Sure.
So it's the role of technology, okay, and related to that, but also separate is the impact of the change in the climate that I already talked about, right? It's like, so how do we better deal with it? What's our role and responsibility in it, particularly as it relates to fresh and clean water? We need lots of water. It needs to be clean, and we certainly can't leave a dirtier water footprint behind ourselves.
Right.
There again, there's a lot of technology. There are also some things for AI that's really going to help us in that area. We use a lot of plastics in our packaging today. And
I saw that you recently rolled out a beta test, right, of a different packaging. That looked amazing.
Yeah, I mean, in Europe, we have on a very large scale, full commercial scale, used a non-plastic format. It's a little bit easier in Europe because there's lots of disincentives to use plastic, i.e. taxes and regulation.
But I imagine not so easy on the distribution side, right?
It turns out plastic is a phenomenal material, because it's flexible, right? It doesn't really damage the berries, as opposed to more rigid. If you make the paper as flexible as the plastic, then that creates all sorts of issues. So,
sure.
But there is the whole impact of climate change and environmental impact. And
something I know that Driscoll's has always been concerned about. And I think that's one of the things that it marks you as a unique company, and that is that it's not just about, one of the things I think that's really unique about Driscoll's is that since I've been a part of the company, it's always thought 40 years out, right? Not just 5. Obviously, there's a lot of long-range planning that's, in the 1 to 3 years, but you're always thinking like, what does 40 years out look like? And I think that when you think that way, you also think about people and planet. And so I know that you've been very active in terms of your sustainability efforts, and I think that really just an applause for you.
And you can call the efforts whatever you want to call them, okay? But for us, it's about whether we can have a business in the next generation, right? So we actually, this year, 2025, is one of the years where we don't quite look 40 years out. We look 25 years out. So we look out 25 years, and we allow ourselves the freedom to imagine
Mm-hmm.
what things are going to look like.
Yeah.
And we get lots of inspiration from people outside. We talk to people that think about the future and talk about the future. Okay. And so we imagine what farming is going to look like. We imagine how consumers shop. We imagine the markets, they're going to be the biggest consumer markets, right? For example, we're going to take our 50 largest city markets today. So individual cities that are markets. So, I mean, New York would be our number one market today, New York City, right? And we take our 50 biggest city markets today, which, how well do we do there? Okay. Let me say, okay, well, 25 years now, what are those 50 cities? What are the 50 cities that are going to be the 50 largest berry markets? And how well are we positioned today to address those markets? And we're going to see some obvious holes, okay, because you're going to have places like Kuala Lumpur. Obviously, lots of big cities in Southeast Asia will show up. Lots of cities in India, but we can't even get into India today because they have very high tariffs. Okay, 35% tariffs.
Wow.
On berries. And that doesn't mean that we're going to write a plan for every single one of those markets, right? But we can begin to say, okay, where should we prioritize? How should we think about it, right? And that's when we did this exercise, 13, 14 years ago. And we said, we should really go to China.
Mm-hmm.
And people just thought we were crazy. Okay, like, why would you go to China? Okay, and we didn't go to China to have cheap berries. Our most expensive berries in the world that we sell today are grown in China and sold in China.
Wow.
The most expensive berries in the whole world are Driscolls.
I wouldn't expect that.
And of course, that's because we're just going after a 100 million people market, not 1.2 or 3 billion people. And so, the future, what that looks like, okay, is very, very important, okay, and including, you can try to model out how temperatures are going to change, okay, and does it make certain regions where we grow berries today very, very challenging, and therefore we should maybe hold the footprint and not expand it. But of course, it also will open up new areas. Mm-hmm. It isn't just that it all goes away. Okay, it in fact also creates new opportunities, which is why people are growing grapes for very, very good sparkling wine in the south of England, right next to where we grow berries. Okay,
interesting,
right? And so it's not just a one-way street over the cliff, right?
Right.
There's also opportunities in there that we have to look at. And then that's the people component, right? And that really is three things that I really am emphasizing. It is the berry business benefits from people that have a lot of experience in the berry business. But as we have all these changes, particular changes with technology, we need to bring our people along for that journey. Because we're much more global in nature, okay? Even if we're going to have less trade between the regions, okay, we're still going to have all the regions. And the different regions are going to grow very fast. Our fastest growth are in two of the regions outside North America. We need more people with a global mindset and people that have adventure in their blood. Okay, so that's easy for me to say because I came from Denmark and went to Waco, Texas. Okay, and that is a big cultural change that you can pretty much have. But we do need more people with that. Right? We need people that say, "Hey, I will go and work in Agadir, Morocco for a couple of years because I think that would be just really cool." Okay, and I'll go and help the growers out there with something, right? Or I'm interested in go and work on the brand in China, okay, and really making sure that it feels like Driscoll's, okay, and I'm interested in doing that. So we need more, and we have some people like that, but we don't have enough. And then we have to embrace the idea that the problems and the opportunities ahead of us are more complex. And therefore, people that work on identifying the opportunities or solving the problems, they need to have more diverse experiences, okay, when we put the teams together. So I believe that if you put a whole bunch of people that came from my hometown in Silkeborg, Denmark, okay, together and work on some of these problems, we are less likely to come up with a really creative solution to a very, very complex problem. And I see, I like to study other companies, okay, but I think when you see some of these really successful Nordic companies, they're small countries, okay, they don't have that many people. They sort of get forced to do this, right?
Yeah.
And take Novo Nordisk, for example, that has come up with a GLP-1 drug. I happen to have a personal friend who was the head of R&D for one of the very, very large biotech tech companies in the world, not Novo Nordisk. And they talked about the exact same drug, pretty much the exact same time as Novo Nordisk did. And they decided that there was not a real market opportunity in GLP-1 drugs. Okay, right? There wasn't like that. There wasn't like the drug discovery was like so unique. There isn't. I mean, the application of it is unique.
Wow, that's a
But they talked
testimony to
about this,
the
and they could
power
not.
of people, right?
Right,
Isn't it?
right.
Like
And
same
so,
product opportunity, and just the people made a different decision.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
I think you got to be willing to sort of challenge yourself. Again, this is not a DEI initiative or anything like that. It's not about quotas and stuff like that. It's about like
Diversity of experiences, differences
diversity
of
of
ideas.
experiences and
Yeah.
thought, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this, that's almost want to find a different word in diversity, just because not to get it confused with this sort of bigger dialogue. Okay. But it's right. How can we be more competitive?
That's right.
And I want this company to have the most competitive organization. Okay. And the people make that happen. Okay. I don't make that happen.
Yeah.
There's 8,000 people that work here.
Yeah.
They're the ones that make that happen. Okay.
Yeah.
And they have to have very different experiences. Okay. So it's about culture. It's about upbringing. It's about education. We don't all need to have PhDs, okay, to come up with the good ideas. Okay. We do need some people that have PhDs, okay, to do some of the science that we do. Right. But there can be jobs that historically we have always said it takes a college degree. And I'm going like, let's get rid of that requirement. Okay. Let's see if we can find some really clever people that just think about these things a little bit differently than we do, right?
Yeah, and I think like just to add to that, because I led DEI for a while, and it is a really interesting conversation. And Jamie Dimon, who you were referencing earlier, he actually spoke on this just recently, and he said, it's not about quotas, it's not about numbers, it's just about performance. That diversity in general creates better outcomes, and the thing though, the missing link is about the relational competency, right? We have to be able to disagree and still be friends. We have to be able to have differences and still be able to hold each other in high regard, even if we disagree, and work to an outcome that actually works for the greater whole. And I laughed about this with Sheila, because Sheila and I are yin and yang. And when we often approach a solution, we'll go at each other on the front end of things. And it's like, we see things so differently. And yet the outcome ends up being really, really good because of that difference. And I think that in our society right now, one of the things I observe is that we have forgotten how to debate. We now will throw somebody out over a difference, right? It's, you're canceled. And I really hope that we can relearn relational competency skills, right? To disagree and still be friends, because in a world I judge that is becoming more complex, as you say, right? More uncertain, more ambiguous. We do have to come together from many different backgrounds and come up with creative solutions. And the problems that we face, and that you certainly face at Driscoll's, these problems that are not easy to figure out, right? Water shortages in California, how to get product all over the world and have it still delight consumers, how to grow in emerging markets. These are not easy solutions, and it does require many people from diverse backgrounds to come together and to innovate, and that does require a certain relational competency. And I do think that's one of the things that's missing. And I also, one more thing to say, and when you talk about your issue around leadership, I think that the real linchpin there is middle management, which often gets forgotten. It's like the senior leadership team usually is aligned. They know what's happening. They communicate that to their direct reports. Direct reports tend to be pretty well informed. And then there's this layer below that often gets left out. And I find that's a really big opportunity area for most companies.
Yeah. We've invested, this area we've been sort of invested disproportionately is to really try to be much, much better at sort of that mid-management level, right? And it was actually one of the few areas where in our employee survey that we were not very good, okay, years ago. And so we identified and reallocated a whole bunch of our resources towards helping out the middle managers become more effective managers, right? And we have, in fact, become much, much better in that area and gotten people to help, okay? But I think, Ryan, is that I believe, okay, it's not about winning the argument, okay, is that I think as a leader, you have to be willing to go and be sort of like the Teddy Roosevelt thing is like, you got to
Mm-hmm.
be in the fight, you're going to be willing to be in the battle, okay, and it's not necessarily about whether you win every fight and every battle. You got to be willing to be in it, okay, and if
Mm-hmm.
you're willing to do that, you also got to be willing to sometimes lose and just walk away and then be ready to go again, okay, and I think that's the world that I definitely feel like I'm in right now, is that
Yeah.
I want to be in the conversation, okay, and I rather be sort of in that dialogue, okay, and fight over the issues, okay, and we won't agree, but if I lose the argument, I'm also not going to turn around and cancel you, okay, on the
Yeah.
other end, okay, that's just the way it is, okay, so
That's what I want people to know most about you, Soren, I think, is just that you are, it's a real, you're so resilient and all that you've been through and all that you've bounced back from. And I think that it's just what I want people to know most about you is that you are not afraid to get in there, as you say, with an adventurous spirit to scrap it out, and also a willingness to be wrong sometimes. And that you don't hold it against anybody if you are. And I think that's something that, makes you unique among CEOs, because I've met a lot of CEOs and I've coached a lot of them, and not all of them can take feedback, and not all of them are willing to be humbled by someone that may see something different than they see it. As I think part of imposter syndrome is that I need to be right so that I look like I deserve the crown. And I don't see that in you. And I think that, I don't know if that's a product of just you or just a product of the Driscoll's culture that you've been a part of.
I think it's part of having learned it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't I would say I was always that way, right? And so, if people feel like that you have to win every argument, okay, then that gets very tough, okay. So I think that was definitely a time when I think people felt that, okay, and I got that feedback. That you don't change that overnight, okay,
Yeah.
for sure, okay. So you really have to
Yeah.
work. You have to catch yourself, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes, okay, and you're gonna have to be a repeat offender, but you have to give yourself, I think one of the things that you taught me was you gotta give yourself. You can't be so hard on yourself as you're trying to change,
Yeah.
that you just sort of end up giving up, right? You got to give yourself a little bit of credit, even when nobody else is giving you credit for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You got to
It's
give yourself a little bit of credit.
probably more my wife that taught you that than me, because she preaches about self-compassion, and she's really an advocate for it. And it's the only really way you can take accountability and learn. Is because if you're so hard on yourself, then you actually, part of the ego's defense is, I don't want to look at the shadow. And I don't want to see it. It's not there. La, 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 I don't want to see it. And the only way we can actually have a personal breakthrough is when we sort of go through that wake up moment. Then we can begin the cleanup. So it's like wake up, then we can clean up, and then we can actually start the hard work, which you've done, which is the grow up process. And after we go through the, wake up, clean up, grow up, then we can finally show up. And I think that's where you're at now in your leadership journey, is that you're showing up for it. And you're finally in a place where I think you can create the legacy that you always dreamed of. And I just celebrate you, Soren. I celebrate Driscoll's. I celebrate you and your leadership role. And I also celebrate you as a father, which we didn't talk about today, but I know how dedicated you are to your boys and to your family, and what just an amazing human being you are all the way around, not just at work, but also at home. And thank you so much for spending time with me and trusting me to have this conversation with you. And I think so many people are going to benefit. And just thank you so much.
You're welcome, Ryan, and I always appreciate the support you and your wife have given me, okay, and so it's been a fun journey to be on together. So
Thank you
very
so much. One other thing, Soren talks about the importance of getting help. And this is something that a lot of leaders don't admit out loud. But in our experience in working with executive teams, and specifically the C-suite, what we see is that really high-performing leaders usually have an executive coach. Both Sheila and I serve as executive coaches to many executive leaders, and we are lucky to have that position. And we believe that it's incredibly helpful, because you need a place where you can bounce off ideas. You need someone that's going to keep you accountable. You need someone that's going to help you know when you're creating the impact that you don't want to create.